All right, this is Mr. P, and we're back for video. Gosh, what video are we at now? Video number 10. We're on lesson number 10. And this is where we get to the Harlem Renaissance, which is sometimes called the New Negro Renaissance, but is not the same thing as the New Negro movement of the early 1900s that we already talked about. So we're going to look at, how Black folks use art to create and understand their reality and resist white supremacy. The underlying causes, just to re-emphasize, the Great Migration, the New Negro movement in response to the racist caricature, the need for Black art that portrays Black people as they are and not under racist caricature, the Great Migration, which you might have renamed at that point if you did that exercise in the previous video, moving Black people to the north, and the as a response to the violence. So all these videos has been a backstory to the emergence of the Harlem Renaissance, this incredible Black art movement of the 1920s and 30s. All right, so origins here. Two important figures, Black figures who fight, who recognize the importance of Black art. Victoria Earl Matthews is featured here. She's a Black woman feminist who writes an essay and presents it to various Black women's groups called The Value of Race Literature, basically arguing as early as 1895, during the beginning of the New Negro movement, that Black art forms were undervalued. She mentions, Black literature. She mentions Black music. You see this in this image. The Fisk Jubilee singers were the ones who, sang spirituals. That Black spirituals, that Black art forms were undervalued, and we needed to that the community needed to bring them forth and create Black art, basically. We actually saw Carter G. Woodson argue for that in Miseducation, that Black folks should create art based on their experience. Elaine Locke in 1925, at the traditional kind of, this is the peak of Harlem Renaissance for many folks, in his in Survey Graphic, he publishes an edition called Harlem Mecca of the New Negro, which by this point, over half of Harlem was now Black, and this features Black artists and writers and intellectuals and scholars. Carefully selected, but is seen as, so Elaine Locke is seen as like the architect of the Harlem Renaissance, kind of organizing and curating it. Du Bois, by 1926, is, he was at the forefront of the new Negro movement prior to the Harlem Renaissance. And by 1926, he argues that Black theater needs to create art about us, right? It should reveal Black life, right? Language used at the time, Negro life as it is. Art by us, right? Written by Black authors for us. So should cater to a Black audience, and near us, that the theater should be in Black neighborhoods and the masses of people. You can see him moving in that direction of away from the earlier portion of the New Negro movement and towards a view of, the masses of Black people should be respected and should be creating art and whatnot. So he's beginning to move in that direction, not all the way there yet, but moving in that direction. Harlem, I already mentioned, right? 1910, mostly white. By 1930, mostly Black. Black folks had moved into Harlem. In many ways, white folks ended up kind of moving elsewhere in New York. And so you end up with a Black neighborhood in Harlem. Here's an image from the 1920s of Black children outside of a school dancing. So this, without that transition from the Great Migration, you wouldn't have Harlem as the epicenter of this Black cultural movement. So I want to emphasize that art is political during the Harlem Renaissance, right? You have art that makes statements. Sometimes it's just it's not necessarily talking specifically about racialized violence or something like that. You have here, for example, Auguste Savage, who is a Black woman sculptor, incredible sculptor. She creates these beautiful images of this hand holding these Black singers, right, to emphasize the importance of Black artists, Black singers, and Black art form. So that piece will be listed as an option for you to react to in your, if you can learn more about Auguste Savage and her sculpting work, which is just absolutely incredible. And there's a lot more that you can look at. She also does sculpting work that portrays African identity as well. So art is always political. It's about identity. You have Horace Pippin's 19. This is a little bit after the Harlem Renaissance, but still kind of considered generally part of the movement. Talking about World War II, actually, and the role of this victory in Europe campaign. Well, he talks about how, well, look, we need a victory. We have Black folks fighting for victory in Europe, but what about victory for Black equity in the United States? You have Aaron Douglas, a Black artist of the 1920s and 30s, painting a series of beautiful images, looking at, you can see the imagery of the chains here, breaking of the chains, this kind of fight for equity, for access of the Black community. You can see this man with a book here. You can see Black soldiers, right? That the movement towards the 1910s, 20s, 30s towards equity and equality is represented in his artwork. So, the paintings are political too. You have Richmond Barth's sculpting work, which portrays the diversity of Black experience. He's a gay Black male sculptor who portrays the Black male body as a sensual, beautiful kind of work of art. And so, he's portraying that kind of diversity of sexuality and identity within the Black community as well with his sculpting work. He also sculpts the Haitian Revolution leaders, and some of his work is in Haiti. So you can, if you're interested in his sculpting work, you could potentially use him as an artist to do some more work on with your assignment. So art is political at the time. It's about identity. It's about representing Blackness and Africanness. It's about representing the fight for equality. So we're going to take a look at a couple of poems here. Langston Hughes, an important queer Black Harlem Renaissance poet, he and this is something that's important to recognize. A lot of the Harlem Renaissance, a good number of them, Harlem Renaissance artists and poets and singers, are gay, bisexual, queer in some sense, and so that's an important piece we don't want to erase here. So Langston Hughes, he writes a piece called "The Minstrel Man," and I think this piece really captures the fight of the against racist caricature. So if you look at the Jim Crow caricature and you read his poem, it's quite jarring, right? He writes, "Because my mouth is wide with laughter and my throat is deep with song, you do not think I suffer after I have held my pain so long. Because my mouth is wide with laughter, you do not hear my inner cry. Because my feet are gay with dancing, you do not know I die." And so he's writing this to, all those who watch minstrel shows for fun, do not recognize the humanity and dignity of real Black people, because they're looking at Blackness as a caricature for their own entertainment. So this is just a really powerful piece combating that minstrelsy. Claude McKay is another important Black poet at the time who writes a piece called "If We Must Die" in 1919 at the kind of beginnings of the Harlem Renaissance. And he writes, "If we must die, let it not be like hogs, hunted and penned in an inglorious spot, while round us bark the mad and hungry dogs, making their mock at our accursed lot. If we must die, oh, let us nobly die, so that our precious blood may not be shed in vain. Then even the monsters we defy shall be constrained to honor us, though dead. O kinsmen, we must meet the common foe. Though far outnumbered, let us show us brave, and for their 1,000 blows deal one death blow. What though before us lies the open grave? Like men will face the murderous, cowardly pack, pressed to the wall, dying, but fighting back. So Claude McKay, 1919, right? This is during the Red Summer. He's writing a piece that's at the beginning of the Harlem Renaissance that's trying to argue, let's defend ourselves. This is something we see with A. Philip Randolph. We see this with the Black World War I veterans who defend themselves during this and their communities during this year. So some of the poetry at the time is a response to and a reflection of and an organizing tool around the fight against racialized violence and terror. So now, well, where are people going for entertainment? And there's going to be two clubs I'm going to talk about. The first is quite problematic, and the second is more, empowering. So the first is the Cotton Club. You might notice by the name, the Cotton Club, that already we have an issue here, right? This is a club in New York where that was white owned and for white clientele and hired Black entertainment, but did not allow Black people to come as clientele. So they were trying to recreate a plantation environment, calling it the Cotton Club. They had restrictions on the skin tone of women dancers. So women, in order to perform here, Black women had to be of a light skin tone. They hired people like Duke Ellington, who's a important figure in jazz, a brilliant artist. But the Ellington Band's show would perform these nights called jungle nights. So that harkens back to a notion of Africa as a primitive, barbaric place. Some of the Harlem Renaissance artists maintained that understanding of Africa as a place far away, not a place of the Black American experience, but something to kind of fetishize in a way. And the Cotton Club, white clientele loved those types of names and things like that. As you can see here, right, this is white clientele on what I believe is a New Year's Eve party. But anyhow, it's you have the Black artists and bands performing for white clientele at the Cotton Club. Cab Calloway, he's another important figure here. And his orchestra at the Cotton Club, they performed there. You can see the kind of Black plantation atmosphere, right? You have a Black person inviting in a white clientele, right? So Black people as servants and as entertainment, not minstrelsy, but right, a way in which this kind of Blackness and segregation being segregated is reproduced in the Cotton Club. So where you want to go for real empowerment and Blackness in all of its beauty is the Savoy. The Savoy is the Harlem, the heartbeat of Harlem, according to Langston Hughes. The Savoy is Black managed. There was white ownership, but it was Black management of the ballroom. It was an interracial, integrated ballroom. Lots of Black folks went here to dance, and that's really important for us to recognize. So the Savoy is the place during the Harlem Renaissance that is the empowering place for Black folks to go. You have dance battles. You have the forerunner of swing dance, which is known as the Lindy Hop, that Frankie Manning was an expert in. I really want you to pause and watch these 3 YouTube videos about the Savoy. Some of them are interviews with folks years later. The first one is from Frankie Manning, and one of these, I think it's the second video, is a video of the Lindy Hop, and you're just going to be blown away by the kind of dancing that happened at this time. So especially if you're my third period, maybe you can learn some of these dances, because I know you all like to dancing at the beginning of class. If you want to learn some of these dances, and when we get back to school, we could maybe do some, you all could do some Lindy hopping when we get back. Really want you to watch these videos. So I'm gonna, one last thing in these last minute. Jazz, of course, Langston Hughes, jazz emerges at this time. This is Bessie Smith, Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, jazz emerges, according to Langston Hughes, as the inherent expression of Negro life in America, right? The eternal tom-tom beating in the Negro soul, the revolt against the weirdness of the white world, of the world of subway trains, of work, 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 of joy, laughter, pain swallowed in a smile. For many, jazz is where is not just this view of